Welcome to Old Man Blerd. Hi, I'm John, and along with my friend Terrence, we make up a pair of lifelong geeks who happen to be black, over 50, but are certainly nerds first and foremost. The Alpha Geek and the Omega Freak. And we welcome everyone. And by everyone, we mean nerds, blerds, and bleaks, cosplayers and role players, geeks and freaks, Marvel zombies and distinguished competitors, Trekkies, Star Warriors, Batmaniacs, and Spider fans, Warhams, Whovians, AFOLs, adult fans of Legos, Tolkienites, Weeaboos, Supernatural hunters and otakus, Ava geeks, Bro stars and Sistars, Pokemon trainers, Potterheads, Bronies, Whovians, Browncoats, and Scoobies, and all nerd properties in between. Because we are over 50, we've seen a thing or two and have experience, long experience, with a lot of these properties. So thank you for listening to Old Man Blerd.
Hello.
Hey, I can hear you now.
What's up?
Oh, we're in.
Yes, we are.
All right. So welcome to Old Man Blerd, a podcast with two elder statesmen of the nerd world. I'm John, and that's Terrence. And today, I was going to. There's a whole bunch of news. There's a big patch to Baldur's Gate 3. The Pokemon DLC is coming out. Multiple cancellations of things we love, multiple renewals of things we love. But I think that today we're going to talk Doctor Who. I think both of us are Whovians. Is that what the term is? Doctor Who-ites, Whovians. Doctor Who is currently going through like a 60th anniversary right now. And they have all kinds of things going on. They have all kinds of plans that they're doing. There is a big sort of, I guess it's like an episode guide history kind of thing that's happening that they're going to release. And they've released a bunch of the Magic the Gathering cards that's happened. And I've gotten a deck of them. So they're pretty interesting. It's cool. They're sold at Walmart and Target. And I think part of this sort of renewal and anniversary is that they're having the return of a really beloved character, Donna Noble. And they're doing, I guess, 3 specials. 2 of them have been shown. And I've seen the first one and the second one. Did you get a chance to see them yet or no?
No, I'm afraid not.
No worries. It is so I enjoyed them. I did enjoy them, but I think that there's some issues, and I think that the people are going to have with it for sure. I don't particularly have some of the same issues that some people might have, but I think that it's worth addressing, particularly on a podcast where it is 2 black nerds, and we often touch on representation and good casting, bad casting, organic casting, stunt casting, that kind of thing. Anyways, Catherine Tate is the actress that plays Donna Noble, and Donna Noble, you've seen those episodes though, haven't you, Terrence?
Yes.
And the thing about it is that those episodes were really good. I think she was one of the few companions that Doctor Who has had where they weren't madly in love with him. Like, I think Rose was in love with, Doctor Who that was played by Tennant, I think that Martha was in love with that same doctor. I believe, gosh, I'm trying to think. Clara, I think she was in love with the Matt Smith iteration for
Yeah, she
sure.
was.
Um, and I think even the fifth Doctor, there was some love there with what was the companion? I forgot the name
Well,
of
he
the.
had three of them. He had three
Yeah,
of them
but
at the same time.
the Sarah Jane was, I think, the one that I'm thinking of.
That's four. That's number four.
Yeah. Oh, fourth Doctor. My mistake. But I think that
And Leela is the other one that he kind of loved, but he would never admit in the court of law.
uh who exactly?
Leela, she was a barbarian. Michael
Oh
Pender
yeah, that
crafted her.
that was that the fourth Doctor as well? I believe that was,
Yep.
wasn't it?
Yep.
Yeah, and I think that he as an actor had a problem with that actress, which caused him to leave. I mean, I could be speaking out of turn. I thought that there was something going on with him and one of the actresses off screen that caused some turmoil. But Donna Noble as the sort of traveling companion for, I guess it was the 10th Doctor. That's, if I get my numbers correct. I always forget numbers. I always remember the
Yes,
actors.
the 10th Doctor.
10th Doctor. So she, not to give away any too many spoilers, at least her in her particular time with the Time Lord, uh, he had to wipe her memory, and it was a harsh kind of situation. It was one of those things that a lot of fans, myself included, were kind of like, she kind of got kind of screwed there. She kind of got messed over as a character, and I think that this is an effort to redress that. And so they've come out with some, and they have. So there will be some spoilers, like what was the character? I forgot. It was that the Doctor was married to. Gosh, I'm a little under the weather, so my memory is a bit shot.
River
Um,
Song.
River Song, yes. Spoilers. River Song, say in my River Song accent, spoilers. Um, in the specials, a situation happens that requires her to re-engage with the 10th Doctor, at least the face of the 10th Doctor, because it's actually the 14th Doctor is what they're
Yes.
saying. So, and Donna has a daughter that is trans, and that's not speaking out of turn or any kind of. It's actually important to the plot. It's actually central to the plot and what happens within the story. I do want folks to see it. So I don't want to give too much away outside of that. And it is important, and it works absolutely fine. The thing that is tough is that representation, when it starts initially, tends to be heavy-handed, and it's only because people are trying to address the things that a particular group is going through currently, and they want to tell stories about it. And so Donna's daughter, Rose, interestingly enough, named Rose, is a trans individual, feels different and out of place, and it does play a role in the plot. And it was fine. I think that we often, I think also, it's always difficult to talk about issues of representation when you are not part of the group that is being represented. I always get a little like, when you have a bunch of people that happen to be white talking about, what's with the blacks? What's going on with, what do they think? And it always feels like, ugh. And so I have to admit that I can understand for our trans listeners that feeling of like, ugh, these guys aren't trans. They don't know what we go through. How can they speak on it? But I do think that we're speaking from a place of allyship, and we want to kind of, and we're nerds, and this is a nerd property that's right up our alley as Black nerds in terms of dealing with these things about representation. So that's the start. That's the foundation. And now we can have a conversation about it. The second episode, the second special, has the Doctor meeting Sir Isaac Newton, and Sir Isaac Newton is played by an East Indian gentleman. I'm not sure of the name. Forgive me, I should have had that up. But that sort of contradicts some of the things that I would be able to say as a fan, because, you know, people are going to say, oh, it's pandery by having this trans actress be in the show and have it be so central. And I'd be like, no, it just served the plot. It was fine. But then they cut me at the knees by having an actual historical figure played by someone that is not of the same ethnicity or race. So that was the tough thing. And so, you know, Doctor Who, are they pandering? Are they not pandering? I think it's still kind of an open question. So what say you, my brother?
It goes back and forth. It's truly about balance of the spectrum.
Mm-hmm.
From a couple of things. Number one, when you look at the mockumentary, the Confederate States of America,
Mm-hmm.
where Black slavery is still around, they have whites running around in blackface for Black roles.
Mm-hmm.
And why I'm mentioning that is because, to a degree, that's exactly what happened to the 20s when film first came out.
Sure. There was
And then again,
Birth of a Nation by D.W. Griffith had people in blackface.
Exactly. And there were many people who had to hide what they were, as recent as being Kingsley and as late as Boris Karloff.
Sure. Well, and you
know.
have so many different people. You know, you have John Wayne being Genghis Khan, and you have Natalie Wood playing Maria
Native
in
American.
and playing Maria in West Side Story. So
Mhm.
there's, you know, there's a litany of situations in which that happens. And I think in trying to redress it, they're saying, okay, well, let's cast a trans person for a trans role. And I'm like, great. You know, it's gonna, I think the problem that all of these things have, and I'm starting to get a sense of it, is the problem that these kinds of things end up having is that for one group, it's like, oh, catch up already. I mean, I'm like, for me, I'm like, oh, I'm already consider myself an ally for the LGBTQIA plus community. So whatever, catch up. And then there's other people that are like, oh, I can't believe they're doing that. They're jamming this down my throat. It's heavy handed and they're preaching at me. And I just want my fantasy to be fantasy and not be political, which is kind of ironic considering the very nature of all of these things is that they're political. Doctor Who is sort of political, you know, whether it wants to be or not. It's like if he's going to a place where World War I is still happening, he has some opinions, or World War II, or the Civil Rights Movement, or whatever else. He's a time traveler. There's some opinions you're going to have about history, like we all did. But you were saying?
Well, it's the same thing from the point of view that those people had to deny their heritage to get parts, and now they are flipping it to a degree by having someone have their heritage but play someone historical. So, is it an alternate reality? Is it? I mean, there's so many ways. That's the one thing about Doctor Who. You know, D in TARDIS stands for dimension.
Sure.
So he could be in an alternate reality, even for that nanosecond. We don't know. But
Yeah.
for those in the back of the room, they might go, well, this just totally against history. And we're going, okay, there was a sonic screwdriver in 1875 running around that we don't know about.
Well, and that's the thing is I didn't have that much a charge with it because, you know, it is, you know, it could be another dimension. They make some pretty funny jokes about it that I thought were kind of cute about having met him. But it's the tough thing is that for every argument that you're not pandering to quote unquote the woke left or whatever, there is an argument that says, oh, well, look, that's clearly unnecessary. It's like if you have Anne Boleyn being played by a Black woman, or you have, you know, Sir Isaac Newton played by an East Indian gentleman, you know, it's almost like you're actively trying to make the people who would get mad, which, I think it's probably healthy for them to, have their buttons pushed because, for a real long time, the only representation that existed was, sort of from the white male and female Northern European paradigm. They didn't even deal with Eastern Europeans or that much, or even Southern Europeans that much. It was all Northern Europe that was represented.
Yeah,
And
that's one of the big arguments with the neo-Nazis when they talk about their Aryan nations. They seem to forget that some of the Aryans were more Hindi or Mongolian.
sure, I think that initially the etymology of Aryan comes from East India. So yeah. And the swastika itself was, a Buddhist symbol as well as I believe a Hindu symbol.
Na-
But
yeah, it's a Native American Navajo symbol.
yeah, it pops up in a few places. It's been destroyed now because I don't think anyone can like wave a flag with a swastika and people and say, "Oh no, this is a Buddhist symbol." No one's gonna buy that now. But yeah, I think that. So I don't know. I felt like it is at its infancy right now. I mean, at one point in time, I'm certain, Guess Who's Coming to Dinner with Sidney Poitier was heavy-handed because there were people in the civil rights movement. It's like, I'll catch up. And there were other people, maybe perhaps in parts of America, that were like, I can't believe they're shoving this down my throat. I don't believe in it. It's wrong and everything else. And so there are going to be people that are going to react to Doctor Who's casting that way. So, but at the same time, where I can applaud them for their casting and trying to weave in a story that involves a trans individual, that the the Sir Isaac Newton thing kind of, it's like, well, you could have let it be just a regular, white guy being Sir Isaac Newton and told the same joke. It would have been fine. Perhaps some of the jokes are related to it being a different dimension or a different Earth. It's possible, but he is absolutely, in England, has, a white English servant. So it's like, well, maybe, and so my frustration is just, yeah, I think that I want to be able to have an argument that they're not pandering when they do something that it makes it hard for me to say that maybe a little bit they're maybe doing a bit of that.
Well, I think the problem with geekdom that a lot of people don't understand is we all, first of all, have our own vision of how a hero or heroine should be. We have our own vision of how the story should go. And that's the one good thing with all the deep fakes and all the other alternatives. We can actually do a point in our own ending if we want. But the true outcome that we're not addressing is, like, for instance, those who are going to complain about Newton might be the same as a complain about the 15th Doctor.
Yeah, well,
complain about the companion.
Yeah, that's true. I think that they might. And sci-fi has always, for the most part, been fairly forward thinking. So
I mean, yeah, the only time they really have had a problem is, I don't want to say appropriating cultures, but sometimes they didn't have enough ingenuity or imagination to create a culture outside their own. I mean, you could argue with the World of Warcraft, and the Minotaurs being basically Native American, in the game.
Sure.
And stuff like that. If you go from that point of view, it just gets more interesting. It's like, where do you not so much draw the line, but where do you just enjoy it? That's one of the problems we have is a lot of people, they feel just as strongly about someone dying in front of them as they feel about a character change in the show.
Sure.
How many people got rid of Superman when he went to the non-shorts
Sure.
underwear, outside underwear. They got all mad, and you're just like,
Yeah. There were a lot of people that loved Spider-Man's black suit, and there was a lot of people that didn't. I think the tough thing about fandom is sometimes how, even though it, from a macro level is not conservative, and I don't mean conservative in a pejorative way, but but it is not, the fandom can be somewhat conservative in approaching change. I just want to name check the person that plays Rose Noble, Donna's daughter. It's a Yasmin Finney. Just want to get that out there. The actress that plays Rose's trans daughter. I'll try
cool.
and find the gentleman that plays the Isaac Newton character in the other episode, but that might take me some time while we're talking. Yeah, I think they can be very conservative. I think, and I've addressed this in an earlier podcast with us, is that I don't know that I'm going to be comfortable with a Black Doctor Who, if only because I'm worried how the fandom's going to react. And if they react too angrily, I just would be like, that's a bummer, you know?
Well, I think one of the problems is we also have our core. Me, it's always been about the story.
Mhm. It doesn't
And I
serve
mean,
the
that's
story.
exactly. I mean, other than that, I really just couldn't give one way or other. And I don't like when people come in and they want to put their mark on the brand, if you will,
Hmm.
and they just have the character do something that's just entirely not the character
Sure.
for change it. Like the last showrunner of the Doctor, the Timeless Child would have been perfect for the Master.
Uh-huh.
That would explain all the hatred, all of it. They would explain it, that one little change. But
Sure.
instead, when associated with the Doctor, it's kind of like, no, no, see, you had a chance and you just ruined it. I mean, even if the Master just misunderstood, they could still save it.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Well, and I think the thing is that the casting of the actress for her daughter, um, it is it does serve the story. And it actually sort of I think the tough thing about anything, and I think goes for comics, this goes for any sort of quote unquote nerd property stuff, is that there always tends to be a little bit of power creep. There always tends to be a deus ex machina. And it was a bit of a deus ex machina why she was there, to get out of what would happen to Donna if her memories came back. And so, excuse me, it does, but it is kind of in that, oh, well, we kind of figured it out and this kind of works. So,
Exactly.
excuse me. So,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, but I think that, you know, casting historical figures, I mean, I don't need them to look, historical figures that don't look like me to look like me, you know?
Well,
I,
it's also the great thing that conservatives have said that we can't argue to a degree, which is just imagine. I hate to say this because somebody's going to hate me, but it's okay. What if in about 30 years they decide to do, the Washington Park where, Martin Luther King had his speech and instead they have a white woman doing it as
yeah,
Martin, I mean, because you had the conservatives say, well, if you allow one, you can allow the other. And they don't understand there are tiers and degrees and even levels of what should and shouldn't be altered.
sure. Well, and I think that, I feel like part of the problem is, and this is, I think, what, one way of being offended about the casting as for Sir Isaac Newton was just, why not find, I mean, I know that there are plenty of historical figures that are of various races and ethnicities. Why not dig into history a bit and show some people history a bit and have that happen? And that probably sounds completely like what some white supremacist would say. But, I'm approaching it from the other angle, which is like, maybe, expose some people to some history that they don't know about and cast someone of a different race. I mean, the fact that Watchmen, the show, is how so many people even found out about the Tulsa race riots is bananas. I mean, I knew about that at 17, but I think one of the things that you do when you are a person of color or a person that's LGBTQIA plus, or you need to keep your history kind of riding shotgun with you, because if you don't remember it, it'll get forgotten. So, but it's unfortunate that people aren't citizens of or students of history enough to go, hey, why not show King Ahsoka, or why not show Hannibal, why not show, there's all kinds of different historical figures you could show that would be people of color, that would kind of be something that both sides could sort of be fine with, because the people that are like, oh, I don't want it shoved down my throat, well, Hannibal's a real dude. And the people that are like, I want to see myself represented in this piece of fiction, well, Hannibal's a real dude. So you can do that. But again, I didn't have a huge problem with the Sir Isaac Newton. I just think that those kinds of things, when you take a historical figure and cast them as a different race, that you then give so much ammunition to the intolerant people in the world.
Oh, without a doubt. But also to add fire to what you're saying is that what about the ambiguous historical figures that we really don't know how they look like? We just know their deeds.
Yeah, and
We
that
don't know
there's
their
yeah,
their sexuality.
there's plenty of stuff like that. And I think that, Cleopatra is a classic example where it's like, well, she was Macedonian, so she wasn't African. She was a ruler of an African kingdom, but the kingdom of Egypt was different than the kingdoms elsewhere in Africa, the Nubians and things of that nature. And she
Right.
was Macedonian, so she wasn't even African anyway. And I think that people so whitewashed her as a character that there was a backlash to then have her be played by an African American actress. And it's like, well, that's not really it either. Cast it correctly historically. And broaden out what your knowledge of history is, so that maybe instead of just hearing the sort of Northern European, mostly England, arguably, uh, point of view when it comes to history, maybe we could broaden that out, you know. But you're right. It's like when it comes to these things of representation, it gets real tough, because even as an ally, you feel like you're clumsy, and you're, sort of approaching it from an awkward place. So, but I think that one of the things that we had mentioned uh, about sort of acceptance is, how would a person feel about, okay, you and I have come, have said we have no problems with what pronouns, what anyone wants to call themselves. But then you have, what about this sort of notion of trans race, like Rachel Dolezal? You had mentioned a point about, okay, we are comfortable as individuals that are not trans to open our hearts and our minds and our souls to folks that are trans. What about these people that identify as a different race, even though they present as something else? I mean, is there a place for acceptance there? And then it changes a bit, because then it's like, well, do I want this person who was raised as a white person for 20 years say, no, I identify as Black? Because, there is a history of, that you experience as a person of color from very young. I mean, I don't think anybody gets through puberty as a Black person without someone calling them the N-word or something else. I don't, matter of fact, I would argue most people experience it well before puberty is even started.
Probably.
So, and how that informs your outlook on America. But then, what does it mean to identify as something other than what you are at birth? Because, I had, and we also, I think one of the things that when we were doing prep for this episode, ladies and gentlemen, we were kind of thinking about the actor Elliot Page, and who was previously Ellen Page. And I think the thinking that we sort of were thinking about that is that if Elliot Page wants their IMDb to only be Elliot Page, that, have obviously follow what Elliot wants to do. And that's the thing, is that I think the thing that people of color most want, and people that are in other marginalized groups most want, is to be seen and have a voice. And if that's what your voice says, then, okay. But does it, you don't want to dead name anybody, but how do you also acknowledge all of the things that a person did prior to that, and have an openness and an acceptance and a grounded sort of relationship to that? And that's where it gets tricky as I think an ally too. It's like, okay, I don't want to call you by the wrong name or the wrong pronoun, although people do make mistakes. We all have to be soft about that. But, how do you acknowledge your past in a healthy way without making it such a harsh thing like, oh, that's a dead person to me, when that is part of your history? And it's like, I can honor whatever you wish to be called, but is it entirely always healthy to have such just such a stark way of viewing one's past? So I don't know.
Just like a black and white. I mean, we're going totally nerd here for a second. We all remember the first controversy in the 80s about a little game called Metroid.
What was the controversy? I don't remember that.
Everybody thought it was a man until the end. It was a
Oh,
girl.
yeah, Samus. Yeah, that's right. That's right. And arguably is still one of the few female characters that happens in an action game that's a woman. Lead character happens to be a woman. Very few.
Independent, doesn't need help.
Nope.
Not need backup.
No, and I don't know why they haven't. They in video games, because the thing about video games, and I think what was it? I forgot what gate it was. Gamergate. Gamergate. I mean, it really, what happened with video games is there was just a very strong misogynistic, sexist streak with a lot of gamers. Arguably, I think millennial age gamers, perhaps, and younger. And it was like, whoa, how it's almost like there was this perfect storm of people who spent a little too much time in their mother's basement, not dating, not engaging with people at all, and playing video games. And it created this perfect sort of toxic, combustible form of sexism. And I think that
Made us
culminated,
look bad.
yeah, I think, yeah. Arguably, if a person doesn't play video games, probably the judgment still at this point is, oh, you're some kind of sexist, maybe racist, immature person. And there are games. Mass Effect is classic in this way. Last of Us, the first version of Last of Us, I guess the first game. I didn't play the second game, just never got around to it.
They call it part one. That's all.
Yeah, part one of Last of Us. There's some really transcendental, I mean, just transcendent storytelling in video games. So the idea that it's just, it's just a bunch of sexist dudes that just stay in their basement to play video games, nothing could be further from the truth. But the loudest voices and the squeakiest wheels seem to get all the attention, and a whole lot of profoundly sexist and sometimes racist too folks have been representing gamer culture.
And
So
unfortunately, we both have known that one, even in your world of music,
sure,
as far as the metal concerts.
sure, sure. I'm usually the only. I mean, I like a lot of different forms of music, but I definitely, when I go to a metal show, I'm usually the only black guy. And I sometimes have to watch myself because there are people that are, particularly if it's a black metal concert, those folks, it's like, I don't know how it happens, but it's like, let's be Satanists and white supremacists. it's That's what the black metal scene is like. So there's some real intolerance with those guys. But yeah, so it tends to, some of these places that we go, they don't have a lot of representation with people of color and trans individuals and gay and lesbian individuals. So it's sad. But
Well, okay, go ahead.
oh no, that was all I was going to say about that particular piece. What were you going to say?
I say, well, see, but the problem is that the millennials and those who are upcoming, they don't understand that our age, we addressed it with humor. That's why Mel Brooks is so popular with us. That's why, you know, so many
Sure.
others. John
Blazing
Cleese is
blazing
so
saddles.
yeah,
The
John Cleese is so
sheriff is
popular with us.
near.
Yeah, that's right.
The sheriff is near.
Yeah,
Yeah, certainly. And I think I would say, and this is maybe coming from uh sort of an older nerd kind of, and Generation X as well, coming from that kind of place, is that some of these things people are going to be clumsy about. All of these things, people are going to be clumsy about how representation works. So, and they're gonna, and you have to address it a bit with humor in a way. Hold on one second. Oh, okay. Yeah, I'm gonna have to pause for a minute anyway, so I'll edit this one a different way. But yeah, I think that you're gonna be clumsy about these things, and you do need to address them with humor. Addressing sort of these slights and these microaggressions and these clumsy attempts at trying to connect, you do have to address with humor. And if you are a black nerd, particularly a black nerd of our age or older, you are arguably usually the only person of color in the room. And someone would say something kind of dumb, and you could have just thrown hands, or you could just sort of make it a bit of a joke and not downplay their ignorance, but make it a bit of a joke and a teaching moment. And I think that our trans brothers and sisters are arguably going through what African Americans went through in the 60s, and to some extent in the 70s and 80s. They're doing it. It's happening faster because culture's sort of speeding up, but they might need to remember that, and that's not coming from some sort of preachy kind of way, but to that not we don't need to get into a circular firing squad, because sometimes you are an ally and you just make a mistake. You
right.
just say the wrong thing. You're not saying the wrong thing from a place of hatred. You're not saying the wrong thing from a place of spite or judgment. You were telling me about a time when you saw a trans individual at the store and you saw them from such an angle that you didn't see that they were female presenting.
Right.
And
And
you
that's
you go ahead, explain the story, but for the ladies and gentlemen out there.
well, it was a young girl, lady, whatever, and she just had a boy's cut, and she was wearing a hoodie and everything. And to the point, she was kneeled down picking up something in a section in a Dollar Tree. And I said, "Excuse me, sir." And she was talking to her boyfriend, saying how she yet again is misgendered.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, three things. Number one, our age, that word didn't even exist.
Sure.
It just didn't exist. And then number two, you sometimes the aggression that can be displayed about that is better served somewhere else.
Well, yeah, it's like, I think that the one thing that I think that has been happening for people of color, the BIPOC community, and for the LGBTQIA plus community, is that, admittedly, we're a little bit sick of the BS. And so that frustration comes out sometimes and is displaced on people that are just really not coming from a place of enmity. They're coming from a place of perhaps ignorance, coming from a place of not being able to see like you,
Right.
it isn't coming from this place of like, oh, I'm going to misgender you because I dislike you. It's sometimes just the angle. And, depending on the individual, sometimes, it can be difficult. It can be difficult and you don't want to, I guess what you do is you just say, excuse me, instead of excuse me, sir or ma'am. But depending on your generation, that was a respectful thing to do. And
Exactly.
and so I think that, yeah, that would have been a perfect opportunity for that person to say, oh no, I'm sorry, you just you didn't see me there, and you'd be like, oh, I'm sorry, ma'am, and you'd go on about your business. And then both that person doesn't have to carry the burden of hatred and isolation, and you don't have to be made to feel like crap when you meant no harm. And
Well,
but
that's
it's
true. But you're
so
not addressing the other problem here
mm-hmm,
that nobody talks about.
mm-hmm.
Our age and those older are tired of linguistic limitation.
Sure. And I'm a continuing member of the Lama Foundation. It's a ecumenical community where people put on Buddhist retreats and women's spirituality retreats and, Sufi zikrs. Doesn't matter, Native American church ceremonies, all kinds of different things. And I'm smack in the middle generationally, because I'm a Generation X person. The people that started were baby boomers, hippies, of course. And then there's a whole younger generation of millennials. And the millennials are really trying to get some of these things really as part of the language and understanding of, what is happening now. And the baby boomers are just like, wait, I'm going to call one person a they, you know? And
I
so
have a
that,
problem with that one too.
and well, and that linguistic thing can be a trick, and it's tough because, from very early on when you're learning English, they was plural.
Exactly.
Or it could be thought to be plural, they, them, you know, uh, and so rewiring your brain around that can be tough. Now, I didn't particularly have a problem with it. It feels a little clunky in my mouth, but I will always honor someone's pronouns. But I think people do need to have a bit of patience when someone is, well-meaning, just doesn't quite get that piece. Because yeah, that's a piece. I mean, when's the first time you learned the word they or them? 6, 5,
Well, it's not just that.
4?
I'm a linguistic freak in the lexiconist, and what drives me crazy is like there are so many words they can use that have the similar effect without the same execution.
Sure.
So they could say Gemini, they could say they're dual, both have the same effect without being multi. Because
Yeah.
I mentioned to you at one time or another, there's a fire happening, and somebody says, "Well, they are in there," and the fireman goes and get one, and then comes back to get the other and say that they was them. So
Sure.
now you have a fireman going recklessly endangering himself for one person
Mm-hmm.
when they're under the impression that there are multi people. So if they went and said, "I'm dual,"
Mm-hmm.
okay, so you see yourself as more than one, okay, or even group. But to say they, I'm going to run in there and say, so I might be risking my life. If someone now see the other person not being addressed, if anyone ever sues someone because of that, then they'll change.
Well, and like I say, I think that what's tough about these things, and it's kind of, I think it's something that I have seen with the African American community, because, for all of the dangers and evils of being Black, and, what are we going to do with the Black people, that whole thing, you do, you do have to realize that, we're only 14% of the population. And so there's not going to be necessarily a whole lot of people that are necessarily going to bump into your culture and things that you are about. And so they might be going by stereotypes. I think there was a study last year, maybe year before last, that it was like 80% of white America doesn't know one Black person in a deep way. And so it doesn't have a Black friend, is what it was basically saying. And, it makes sense from a numerical standpoint, because if white America makes up roughly 65 to 72% of the population, and African Americans make up between 12 and 14% of the population, well, you do the math, there's probably more people who are actually in white supremacist organizations than there are actual Black people. So, but
Sorry.
so so I think that with our trans brothers and sisters, the number is even smaller. It's like you're talking about 1%, or less than 1% of the population happens to be trans. So I think a little bit of patience, unfortunately, is going to be required when there's just not going to be a whole lot of people that have that experience with you. I'm lucky to have had a childhood friend whose father was trans, and I have a close friend now whose daughter is trans and wanting to identify with male pronouns. And I'm perfect, and a different name, and I'm perfectly willing to do that. That's not a big stretch for me at all. I understand what, my friends, as a parent's issues may be with it, and how they're going to have to navigate with their child in that way. But yeah, I think that again, I don't want to sound like I'm coming on a soapbox and preaching to the trans community, but it really, I think that patience is required. And I say this to all of us that are in marginalized groups, is that, yeah, there's time to get hot and there's time to get mad. But we really need to make sure that you have more allies than enemies. And I suppose if somebody's going to turn to an enemy because you get mad at them for misgendering you, they weren't necessarily a friend to begin with. But there are plenty of people that really do want to try, and maybe that's just my sort of notion of Buddha nature, is that there's a Buddha within everybody, and that there's a kind person in everybody, a compassionate person in everybody. So I give people maybe the benefit of the doubt a bit more. But
I can understand it, but I mean, what people are saying is, going with what you said, there are 8 billion people on this planet. 8 billion. And that means, forget about anything else, just by sheer numbers. Hear me out. Sheer numbers, you're going to have people who want to be trans race, transsexual, hell, even trans species. Just by 8 billion. That number is so huge. It takes 31 plus years to equal a billion seconds.
Sure.
So that alone should attribute to the idea from both sides.
Sure. It's
somewhere along the line, you're going to have, like, your 10th cousin. Like, a good example is, they keep talking about Chick-fil-A and, the LGBTQ and how they are against or whatever. They have 4 sons who have 4 sons who I think have 4 sons. Do you not understand math? That means at least one of them is gay.
Could be, yeah. Well, and I think that's why I think and I think that there seems to be plenty of anecdotal evidence for this. One of the reasons why LGBTQ rights sort of happened so quickly in terms of a time frame was because there were people, Dick Cheney's daughter, and there were conservative people that had gay and lesbian sons and daughters. And so, if you're talking about oppressing your child, that's a little different than oppressing some person that doesn't look like you, that you're not related to. And so I think that arguably sort of those rights of the LGBTQIA groups will be a bit stronger than even, rights for African Americans or immigrants is because, yeah, that can be a family member. You know, maybe you might have an interracial relationship in your family, so it's like, you know, maybe maybe there's someone who married someone that happens to be Black or whatever else. But you know, the odds are you are going to have a relative that is part of the LGBTQ community, which means that, you know, I think that more compassion tends to happen a bit easier. I think it's going to be interesting come election year next year, where they're trying to make some of these issues a bigger deal and do some reversals of gay marriage and different things. It's going to be interesting because I think I guess I'm keeping this podcast clean. The poop show that's going to be next year's election is going to be insane. So anyway, well, we're not going to solve it here, but that was the Doctor Who. It provoked a pretty interesting conversation, I think, about some of these issues. I hope we didn't handle it too clumsily, you know, but, you know, like I say, we're trying to figure out, navigate this stuff with our brothers and sisters that happen to be trans as well. And yeah, there you have it. Doctor Who. Did they go to the Panderverse? Maybe that's what I'll call this episode.
I got a nope for you. I actually found a nope.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So, ladies and gentlemen that might be new to the podcast, we have nopes and dopes, which nopes are things we do not like, and dopes are like dope in the Black colloquial phrase of something that's cool that we do like. So, you have a nope?
Just one nope.
What's your nope?
Warner Brothers Discovery yanked all their programming off of PlayStation network.
Really? Warner Brothers?
So, yep.
So that
Discovery.
means, huh? Why?
So that goes to the.
So what programs are you losing in that?
Oh, all the stuff like a Discovery Channel, Mythbusters, and all the other stuff that was on the PlayStation channel. You know, because you would get it through the PlayStation Network.
Sure. Is it going to Xbox, you think, or is that do they have some kind of deal there?
It's going to they're yanking stuff for tax purposes and going to their Max channel because they're trying to make everything Max.
Oh, yeah. That checks out. Well, you know, I at this point, as a person who follows multiple streams, multiple you know, streaming services, it's getting to the point where it's almost as much as what cable used to be. So, you know, it's like $10 here, $10 there, $10 there. You know, it's still cheaper.
Nickel dime.
They're nickel and diming you. I mean, I have Hulu, I have Disney, I have Amazon Prime, I have Crunchyroll, I have Funimation. I'm trying to think of what else do I have. I think I have, well, I used to have Apple, but I just didn't, it wasn't worth it to me. Paramount, I have Paramount, I think. So, you know, the only thing you sort of miss by having the streaming shows is mostly sports. And considering I only watch soccer and hockey, I think I can get most of those on Hulu or Peacock. But
I know, but it goes back to what I was saying about having physicality versus tangible versus intangible.
Sure. Yeah. But excuse me, I've just been burpy, ladies and gentlemen. You're probably hearing this. It's like, what is this guy? What did this guy eat? Anyways, so yeah, so that's your nope, huh?
Yep.
All right. I don't have a nope. Maybe I'll come up with one for our next episode. I guess the next episode we're going to do is, have we lost our nerd cred? So where can people find you, Terrence? What's your email? Your deets, your details.
DrakeStorm@gmail.com.
All right. And for me, you can send me an email to thatsoquantum@gmail.com or Urban Dharma, the number 8, urbandharma8@gmail.com. Check out our lovely show, That's So Quantum. And I guess we will catch you all in a week. And so, like we like to sign off, don't be a stranger.
Just be strange.
Take care, everybody.